Welcome to the Fire from Two Windows podcast, where we take a deep dive into different aspects of the fire service. My name is Matt Humnicki, and I am joined with my co-host Lou Cominelli. We want to express that these are our own opinions built by experiences and education while honing our craft. These are not the opinions nor directions from our various employers. We are here on our own to spur conversation and help level the playing field for all. Morning, Lou.
Morning, Matt. It's afternoon.
Afternoon. Good afternoon. It's been it seems like every time I get out of work, I got out this morning, and every time I get going, the goal is to go straight to the gym. So you figure hour drive, 8:15, 8:30 can be there. I think I ended up by the time getting fuel and getting back into town and everything. It just ends up next thing you know it's noon, 1 o'clock every time.
Yeah.
I don't know where the day goes sometimes, and it just feels like you're go go go. There's no stopping. But it is what it is, and it's worth it. Woke me up, did the sauna this morning.
Nice.
After the gym. God, I love that.
I hit the legs today. Quick leg workout because we got the new addition to the family sitting on my lap right now.
And that is a puppy for those of you listening.
Yep.
And how much of a fireman are you, Lou?
This would be my second Dalmatian. Not at the same time.
Not at the same time. How's it treating you so far?
It's all right. Potty training's going okay. Mostly peeing outside. I think it's been the wind chill today is I think real feels at 2 degrees, so she is not about going number 2 outside today.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
I think my son or daughter, my daughter, my youngest, got her to go outside this morning before the bus came. So, but I think she's pretty worn out because she just took a bath.
Yeah, don't take her right out unless you got a blow dryer or something.
Yeah,
so
she just
turned to a popsicle out there.
Yeah, she's just sitting on my lap right now, just shivering. More traumatic than I think cold.
Today we want to discuss some gas emergencies. That's going to be our topic. We're going to surround all of our conversation around. What do you got for us to start with?
Yeah, so I mean, they're not the most, what is it? They're not the calls that get your adrenaline going when you hear a fumes job come in. So the way it works where we are, the way they're coded is either a fumes A, fumes alpha, or a fumes B, fumes bravo. And that just really says, for the most case, a fumes A is going to be a natural gas call, a smell of getting natural gas. And a fumes B is going to be a CO detector going off without sickness. If there's a CO detector going off and someone feels ill, then it gets upgraded to a fumes A. Usually when you see that come across the job, we have a monitor at the firehouse, or your phone. When it comes across a phone, it's like it's a job, and we're excited to go on a job, but it's not the structure fire, or it's not the pin job or the technical rescue call. You go up there and you do your job, you make the homeowner happy, and then hopefully find the problem and go home. But I feel sometimes, guys just get complacent with it. And what would you say over the past 5 years, there's been what? Just in our area, in our county, there's been maybe 4 house explosions.
In the county alone? Yeah, I was trying to look up one from when, we were much younger. Jersey Street. Do you remember that one? Maybe that wasn't necessarily in the area. I know we were real little. I must have been like 3 or 4, something of that nature. But there was that, and then I know relatively recent, town to the kind of southeast of us had one right around the time that we had one. That 3 houses were affected by that. City had like 2 right in that same time frame, and this is all like a year and a half.
So you had, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I know the city just had the recent one. Before that was the one in the departments up to the north of us, and we just got the after action report on that. We had ours, We had the one to the south of us, and I'm sure the city had another one sprinkled in somewhere. But this just goes, our the, the city was founded in the early 1800s. Some of these houses are pretty old. The infrastructure is very old. Um, our town was founded in what, 1860 or something like that.
I gotta look up the actual date because it was two towns. It kind of covered most of the west side, and it slowly broke down, and it was kind of established before the settlement of the area,
Yeah, I
and
think
then
I think
the
I
city
mentioned it
kind of
before.
came about, and then the other towns broke off.
I might have mentioned it before. I actually got, as a wedding gift, I got a original lot map of our town before it was named what it is now, when it was named Northampton. So infrastructure is, old. Our town at least is, we're getting to the 75, 100-year mark for some of these houses. Who knows what kind of updating they've done to their natural gas lines. You go from the black pipe to, I don't even know what. Sorry for my ignorance, but black pipe is still usually what they're using for natural gas.
Yeah,
Um,
either that or that new flex pipe, which is kind of being they're going back through and replacing. Have you seen that the yellow stuff?
yeah, yep, yeah.
It's like it's not. I think PEX does make a brand or their own version of it, but there's another one that's out there. Like my parents they had some when they first moved in, some pipes refitted, and they used that flexible hose.
It's like the flexible hose that you see behind your appliances coming off the black pipe,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
apparently they're using that throughout the whole house now. Our area, at least, if you take the city and then you have the surrounding towns and maybe one more ring of surrounding towns, it's natural gas is prevalent. Once you get outside maybe that third ring, you'll run into people that have propane because the gas lines haven't made it out that far yet. But for the most part, it's all out. 75% of our county, I would have to assume, is natural gas. 75% or higher is natural gas. Um, I know in our department, and this was probably before your time, we had, I can't even remember the brand name of meters that we had, but they look like almost trying to fit. It was a box. And the box was probably 3 inches thick, 6 inches wide, by maybe 7 inches deep. And it didn't have a pump on it, so it didn't draw in air. Some of the rigs had like almost like a baster pump, like a hand pump that you could draw air in with it, but the tubes were all old. At one point, one of the corporations that are in town, that have their headquarters in town, donated a bunch of money, and we upgraded our meters, and I thought they were pretty nice. We went from this old 4-gas meter to a 5-gas meter, and the fifth sensor was a PIV, not PIV. What's the one where it ionizes the gas? It's been so long I can't remember because we don't even use them
I'm not
anymore.
sure. And
Look it up.
we had this thing lying around somewhere.
I think we got rid of them maybe in 2012, and then we went to the same meter that the utilities companies use, which is a Sense of Gold meter, which I think is probably the standard meter that first new company should be using. PID. We used to have a PID. So what the PID would do, it would photo ionization detector. It would measure volatile compounds, and how it would work is that it would send like a little bit of electricity. It would draw the product in, it would ionize it, and through the ionization, it would tell you what the volatility was. based off of whatever it did in that meter. It was really more of a hazardous materials team. The hazmat team has PIDs. Really not useful for us in as a first in unit, just doing normal investigations because guys just really didn't know what they were reading. So we use sense of gold meters, and that's what we're primarily going to be talking about is sense of gold meters. That's what the utilities companies use. It's a 4-gas meter. It tests for oxygen percentage, CO parts per million, natural gas, LEL, and then hydrogen sulfide. What then this goes back to when I used to teach confined space, and we used to bring a hazmat guy in to talk about the metering for confined space, and we talk about what's the order you should meter in, what based off of the 4-gas meter that you have, what are the things you should be looking at for it through your meter. And the first thing you should be testing for, and this is on a call where you get a fumes call, unknown odor of something, doesn't smell like gas, whatever the job notes say, but the person calling says we have an unknown odor of something. What the first due unit should be testing for when they first get to that door, and we'll get in the depth about this more, but I'm just kind of overviewing the meter, what we should be testing at. It's looking at your oxygen levels first. OSHA defines your IDLH atmosphere for oxygen anything less than 19.5%. So if something's displacing the oxygen and our oxygen levels are lower, there's a gas being produced that's unknown. And this means that your LEL is not reading anything, your carbon monoxide is not reading anything, your hydrogen sulfides, they're all at zeros, but your oxygen levels are dropping. You have an IDLH atmosphere, there's a gas being produced that's displacing the oxygen. Now we have to figure out what type of gas that is, and we're going to have to call on a specialized unit, a hazmat team, to figure that out potentially, especially if it's below 19.5. If we're getting higher levels of oxygen, there's an oxidizing agent that's producing oxygen in somewhere around, which could be a fire hazard for us if there's a spark. That's also a whole different type of hazard. So the first thing we want to test is the oxygen levels because, one, we need oxygen to sustain life. The second thing we're going to test is the explosive levels. So you're going to look at your LELs. The reason why we want to do that is because that's the next hazard for us. We don't want to be in an environment that could potentially explode on us while we're investigating. After we go through those two, the next we're going to test for poisonous gases. The problem with our 4-gas meters and poisonous gases, we only really can go off of two things. That's hydrogen sulfide or CO. So hopefully we can narrow it down, using your senses. If your oxygen levels are normal, your LEL is normal, but you still have an odor, we might have to bring in specialized equipment again to figure out what the odor is being caused by using your senses and everything else. That being said, we can go back into our natural gas calls, and we can reference back to what order we should be testing our atmospheres at. So let me ask you a question. When you on a CO call, you just get the detector beeping. What's your mindset going into this job?
If just the detector in the home,
Mm-hmm.
so you got to define which one is beeping.
Carbon monoxide. The homeowner states carbon monoxide detectors beeping. There's no illness.
Well, you want to ask them to come outside first. If usually our dispatch, like for us at work, our dispatch is pretty good. They'll tell them they'll go wait outside, even if there is illness. They'll have them wait by the door. Right now it's winter. Go to the door. Um, Try not to open anything up because we want to be able to identify it, not move it around, or clear the gas altogether, and then that way we cannot identify the issue. And then have them, as we're approaching, ask them, "Hey, what kind of sounds was it making? What were the beeps? Is it one beep? Is it two beeps? 5 beeps? 30 seconds? And start to cut it down from there. Then we can start monitoring right at the door, up high, down low, move our way in."
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I hope people are doing that, is taking a reading at the door. Or you get that call where the neighbor hears the detector going off, or the neighbor hears smells the odor, and guys, rush in or whatever. Try to get a reading around that door. Those meters will pick it up, or try to get a reading around a window before you make entry. That's just safe practice, And if you're getting readings of gas or CO on the door seams, you're going to have probably a significant amount of gas or CO within that structure. The other thing is, guys got to realize, firing up those meters, they take what would you say? Our meters take what, a minute, 2 minute,
Uh,
minute and a
yeah, it
half.
seems like a long time.
I would
Everybody
say it
fires
goes,
up.
but
It takes like the whole ride there almost,
yeah,
so a 2-minute response less
yeah, and
sometimes.
you got to be careful where you fire these meters up, because they go through their internal calibration. And if you're too close, if you get outside of the rig and it's still firing up and it's doing its calibration, and you're close to that exhaust,
Mhm.
it's going to draw some of that exhaust fumes in, and your levels are going to be off for that job.
Right, it zeroes it out at that, let's say it's a high level, it'll zero it out, and now it wants to read almost as if that normal error would be a negative number. I mean, it won't, but it's gonna take a lot more to get to 1.
Right, correct. So one of the things we had a utility guy come in and do a couple training sessions with the groups, and he was like, if you're approaching a structure, one of the telltale signs of a CO leak or CO within the house on a cold day or even a warm day is fog or like wetness on the windows. The CO
Okay.
will create fog, and it'll adhere to the windows.
I
Uh,
always just thought it was shitty windows because, like, how some of the double panes,
yeah,
filled with usually, like, nitrogen or,
yeah,
some
whatever
sort of
gas they put
gas,
inside of them.
inert gas.
It could be, they could have a broken seal on the window, but if you notice that the front of the house, all the windows are fogged over, you potentially could have a seal leak. And this happened to me. It's how it always works. You have the training, and then maybe like a month later, you go to a CO call, and the windows are all fogged over, and you're like, your senses get a little heightened. You walk in the house, and the CO levels were elevated pretty high. Um, the other thing with the CO calls, and we're jumping around here, but CO calls is, especially around now, a lot of people don't realize, when you're like, especially Thanksgiving and Christmas that we just, had, like a gas oven, and they're cooking that turkey all day, or Sunday sauce, which is prevalent around here. They're cooking the sauce from 7 in the morning till whenever they sit down at 4 in the afternoon, and that stovetop's on. If you don't have a hood or a window cracked, just the even though you might have perfect combustion within that oven or a good flame on that stovetop, you're still going to produce CO in that house, and you potentially set off CO detectors in your house. And you're going to get the call around, 5 in the evening for the CO detector going off. And one of the questions, hey, I always like to ask, were you cooking today? Oh yeah. Well, what were you cooking, and how long were you cooking? Oh, we had a turkey in the oven. We started at 8 in the morning, and we just sat down to eat. We just finished dinner. Any windows open? Nope, because it's cold out. And it's
Yep.
it's usually that's a good interview question to ask when you're investigating a CO call. The other thing I always come across, I joke with, when if we go up to a house and it's a couple, the guy was like, "Yeah, my wife smells something. I don't smell anything." And I go, I'm gonna get in trouble for this someday from somebody, but I ask the guy. I don't ever ask the woman. As by chance, is your wife pregnant? And oh yeah, they're due. It's because pregnant women's noses are, the olfactory senses when they're pregnant are, I don't know what it is. I don't know the biology behind it, but they can smell way more, way better while they're pregnant than a normal dude. And normal dudes just can't, some dudes can smell better than others, but when you compare just men and women, women can smell things way more than dudes can. I don't know what that, it's probably some evolutionary thing, but and it's funny because the husband will always be like, I don't smell anything, she's crazy or whatever, and the wife will be like, I swear I smell it, it's over here, and I smell it when I do this. And then when you find it, you find the leak, she's like, see, I told you so. It's one of those things. So go back to the CO call. You've metered the door. What's your next step?
Well, now determine if it's, let's say it's adequate oxygen. Now do you have to put a mask on? Do you have to put your SCBA on or not? Fire that thing up. I mean, it should be fired up anyways, but do you actually have to use it going in? You should always have your SCBA with you. Nobody should be going into a potential IDLH environment without SCBA and their PPE on. That's just chaotic. I've seen some departments do it. I have no idea why the hell they do that. But then you're going to start going in. Depending on what they report, if it sounds like it might be a propane issue, maybe it's a propane house versus a natural gas issue versus an actual CO issue. Where are you going to meter? Throughout the house. You're always going to go high and low as you move about. Then I'll start going to the appliances. Kind of the first guess, right? So if it is CO or we suspect it's CO, and that includes, I mean, CO is just like, as you said, it's the incomplete combustion from hydrocarbons. So that means that it's not burning correctly. So it's either going to be one of those, your two fuels. Maybe perchance they got like some kind of weird gas, homemade job type of thing. It's a white gas fuel stove or something like that. Try to go into the stove area of report. Definitely find that detector that's going off and see if you can replicate it. If it's still beeping, and then check the back. Hey, is this, like I said, the one beeps, two beeps? Is it, coincides with something that's the instructions on the back? Then just keep moving throughout the house. Start with the appliances, though. That's a really good start. So we're talking stove, heater, maybe you got a boiler, depending. Those are the two. Usually that's like kitchen and basement for most of the houses around here. I realized out west, some of them don't have basements. A lot of their appliances, such as their heaters, heat pumps, and all that, they're kind of like in a closet on the first floor or the only floor. Could be slight variation to that. But those are two good spots. And then also your washer dryer. We still have a lot of dryers. I know they're trying to outlaw them, but a lot of dryers are gas. My dryer's a gas dryer.
Yeah, so is mine. I think they're more efficient. I don't know why they're for a different day. But one thing you
They
mentioned with CO is, and with all gas calls, you should measure high, then head level, and then down low. The one thing about CO is that, yes, it's lighter than air.
by a very small,
Yeah.
atomically, very, very small difference.
Yeah. So it's so close to the weight of air that it will actually follow the natural air currents of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So we just had a CO call the other day where they were cooking on the stove, and this was an old like vintage 1980s is vintage.
Easy,
Yeah,
easy.
right. I know this stove was pretty old. One of the burners was pretty gummed up with years of cooking on it, so the flame wasn't producing that nice blue natural gas flame. CO detector goes off. We get there. We meter the kid. I ask him, "Were you cooking?" Yep, they were cooking dumplings for a couple hours. I don't know how long it takes to cook dumplings, but they were cooking dumplings, and I guess it's a lengthy process. Well, as my can man was metering, the kitchen had the lowest levels of CO, and then as he traveled back into the bedrooms on the Bravo side of the house, that's where the higher levels of CO were. So I'm still thinking it's the stovetop producing a not a good flame, but we
Mm-hmm.
still got to do our due diligence. So next thing I do is crank up the thermostat and make sure that the furnace isn't pumping out CO into the house. You know, it could have a bad heat exchange plate or whatever. So we crank up the thermostat, we meter all the vents, we go downstairs, we meter around the hood. Everything seems to be buttoned up, all nice. We vent the house a little bit while the furnace is still running. CO levels drop to zero. At this point, the utility company gets on scene and he goes, "Yeah, that it's definitely the stovetop." You know, he turns it on. He looks at the flame. He's like, "Yep, definitely a stovetop." I go, "All right." So I feel better about myself on that one. But the point of that is that the CO was being produced in the kitchen. They shut the stove off. They open a window in the kitchen right by the stove. But just with the way the furnace was working, drawing air through the cold air returns and then pumping air out through the heat registers, CO doesn't go away through your furnace filters. It stays in there. So the CO now is being sucked in through the cold air returns, pumped through the furnace, and now being pumped into the bedrooms and everywhere else throughout the house.
Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind with CO that CO will travel with the air. It's not going to get trapped in a pocket or something because yes, it is lighter, but it's not much lighter. It's probably the closest there is to just normal air we breathe. So the biggest hazard we're going to worry about in these gas calls is natural gas. Now for CO calls, where are you parking the rig?
We so typically we just treat them all gas calls all the same.
All the same.
Yep. So we're uphill, upwind. On our approach, we try to do our best, just in case. You never really know. I might be a little bit more cautious just because I've had a couple of those events. One of them specifically was that I was involved with that one that exploded and it took out the two houses or affected the two houses on either side. That was a gas call. Like it was an actual natural gas leak that caused an explosion. It didn't come in as a fumes. It came in as a house exploded.
Right.
But you never know which direction these things are going to go. And we've gone to other calls that have come in as a gas call. Oh, actually, there was a call that we did respond to. A single unit responded for fumes job, and when they got there, it turned out had a small fire going. But it came in because of the house alarm as a gas call. So it
Oh,
was
okay.
a central alarm system that notified saying, "Hey, I got a gas going on." Well, it turns out it was caused by smoke, and who knows what else was triggering all these different alarms. So when they went, they were expecting a gas call. When they pulled up, they would, "Hey, start the assignment."
Yeah, that's funny you say that because I think I've had a fire or two where it initially came in as a CO call. Then, as we're getting in the rig, same address gets the automatic smoke detector alarm, and then probably en route, neighbors are reporting, flames in the windows or something like that. But I've had structure fire calls where the initial alarm was the CO detector going off, then the smoke detector goes off. But it's a good practice staging your equipment at least what one house away, not directly in front of the structure that you're responding to. Because yeah, it might be a CO detector going off, but CO detectors are also known to read high levels of natural gas just because
Yeah,
of
that's
the
correct.
the molecular composition of carbon monoxide. And I'm not trying to make this into a chemistry class here. By no
Why
means am I
not?
a chemist, but CO detectors will activate with levels of natural gas in the house. Now, I'm not saying you should use CO detectors as your natural gas, for natural gas detection. That's why they put mercaptan in natural gas to give it that smell. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things where, yeah, it could be a CO detector going off. You get there and you're thinking CO, and you kind of, whatever it is, not a big deal. You're not worried about explosive hazards. The next thing you know, you meter the door, and now you're getting LEL readings.
Yeah. And before we go into a lot of the LEL stuff, just part of that process of metering, maybe you find nothing at the stove itself. and you find nothing at, let's say, the heating unit in the basement, nothing in the garage. That's another place you want to check because people leave all their flammables. I got a gas tank in the garage. There's snow blowers out there. I don't want to hike all the way out to my shed. The next stage, as you start breaking this down a little bit further, after the vents, pipes, gas pipes. You could start sniffing and running the pipes. Check the unions, check all that stuff, because a lot of times we actually we'll discover that there's a leaky union or a leaky joint somewhere. That's just a minor inconvenience, and it's just setting off a nearby detector as well. Not necessarily going to be a CO issue causing the detector to go off, but if it is natural gas, it could cause it to trigger. And if there's nothing inside there, sometimes you just get it's every hour I smell smell of rotten eggs. They think they smell gas, and it's not to their discredit, but it might just be the wind blowing the wrong direction that day, like we're having right now. And now it's the meter outside burping, and it just happens to be caught in the air and moving in a direction it wasn't designed to be moving.
Yeah,
Carries it to the door frame or something.
you brought up a good point about the garages. Another question I like to ask, especially when we get these CO calls. It's
Are
always
you
like
running your car?
homeowner came home from work, and the CO detector's going off. Okay, so I show up on scene. They have an attached garage. You can see that the car is parked inside the garage at this point because he just got home. Hey, did you start your car up this morning? Yeah. Did you start it in the garage? Well, yeah, but I had the garage door open. It doesn't matter. That CO, even if your garage door is open, the CO can still get, whatever the way the wind's blowing, or maybe you have drafting issues with your house. That CO can get into the house through the garage, and then you leave, shut the garage door. That CO travels through the house a little bit, and a lot of these detectors, not only do they go off at 35 parts per million, but they go off at a time weighted average. So if the time weighted average amount hits where it's going to be activated, then the CO detector is going to activate. The homeowner gets home. Hey, my CO detector's going off. Well, it's like, what were you cooking? No, I just got home. All right, where you run? The next question is, did you run your car in your garage? Oh yeah, I did, and vent it.
Yeah.
Check. You still got to check everything. You still got to check the furnace. You got to check the hot water tank. Check the stove. Maybe the dog hit the stove. The knobs on the stove. That's happened before. And then it's at that point it's process of elimination. But if it it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck type of thing with the car in the garage.
You mentioned the stove, and that's a good one. A lot of people, actually, a lot of houses we go into, people do not clean their stoves, but the knobs slide right off. You can pull them. Newer ones are a little tight. It's just kind of press fit on there. There's kind of like a spring clip on the inside, but you pull the knob straight off. So I've had 2 jobs now in probably the last 3 years trying to figure out all the knobs are in the off position, but you could smell gas, in the house. Man, you can't figure it out. But it turned out that one of the knobs, when they got placed back on, when they pulled it off, they turned the knob slightly to an on position, not enough to spark,
Yeah.
but not enough to hear it. You don't hear the whistling or anything. And then they pulled the knob off. And when they cleaned up and then pushed it back in, they pushed it back in the off, but like pointing straight up or whatever the off
Yep.
position is. So it was actually on, but when you visually look at it, it looks like they all look like they're in the off position. So just the like axle or spindle in there had gotten turned,
Yep.
quarter turn or so, blowing gas. And there's an older couple that was in there. They had no idea.
Well, it's like our
It
stovetop.
was,
It's just the other morning when I got up out of the bunk, I could smell natural gas in our bunk room. And I asked the other
pilot
guys, I
light
go,
again.
yeah, and it was 2 of them. And I asked the guys, do you guys smell anything? Do you guys smell gas when you get up? No. It's like, man, I smelled gas all the way in the bunk room. It wasn't like stronger anywhere throughout it's just lingering throughout the whole firehouse. I'm like, it's got to be the pilot lights. Go up. I think it was 2 pilot lights were out, and they weren't the usual suspect pilot lights. They were the ones closer to our grill,
Was
not
the
the
hood
ones on
still
the
on?
outside. What's that?
Was the hood still on?
No,
Oh, usually I have that issue. So the hood, when you're cooking or something, the hood creates a weird draft, blows everything out.
they were underneath the flat top griddle.
Oh, really?
So I don't even know how
Hmm.
they went out. I think the stove just needs a cleaning. But
Yeah, probably. So you did mention, so where I was going with that, checking the, at least checking the pipes as well, all your gas lines. Not every meter can do that.
right, ours
And
can.
right. And this is something I've run into. I'm so used to using the stuff that we have in our region, I'll say, like in our county, everybody kind of has the Sensit Golds, or a variant of that. And what that really points to is that I did not realize until taking, I guess maybe I've used it before, but I think it was the confined space course where you had the hand pump.
Hmm.
They had an old school one. It was an old MSA meter, 4 gas meter, but you had to stick the hose into the sensor hole, and then there was a pump on there. It's like a priming pump, no different than when you go to prime a boat
Yeah,
motor
it's
or
like the turkey baster, like
yeah,
what I
turkey
said. Yeah,
baster job, and so you have to continuously pump that. If you don't have either that pump or a little electric pump that's already built in there, that is not drawing air into the sensor to actively test. And MSA does this for a reason because industrial sites, it's really mining safety. Hello, it's in the name, but it's kind of to actively monitor the air in a room, not necessarily like inside of a space, not necessarily pinpoint. So it's the
right.
difference of going, I know it's that house. Okay, now I know it's that room in the house. Okay, now I know it's that gas line in the house. I know it's that union on that gas line, right? You're slowly getting down to a pinpoint accuracy. The ones without pumps, and MSA still makes these things, most of the brands do, they're just ambient.
Yeah,
So if air is not flowing into there at a soft, gentle, breeze, you're not actually picking that up. And I've seen a lot of companies, a lot of departments who either do not budget for that or think they're good enough fail at this. And this is like, it's like a pet peeve. I don't like gas emergencies either. Like you said, they're not exciting. But now that I'm seeing the dangers of the gas stuff and people are not doing their due diligence, now it's becoming this. I got to take this, the ownership of this, or I gotta try and present the information like we're bringing today about these meters. Just because you bought a brand new meter doesn't mean it's doing its job. You can't just go into a house and be like, no, yeah, it turns out it's a bad battery. Well, why is it going off again in another day? Oh, we
right.
metered it. What did you meter it with? You know? Oh, it turns out I used this 4 gas meter from MSA and I checked all the lines. It does not check lines,
Yeah, you
you
got
know?
to. I mean, especially with if it doesn't have a pump, like you said, you, those ambient air meters are not going to be able to check the lines at
No,
all.
it's so your guys can work inside of like a confined space.
Right.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
While they're in there, you can actively monitor, or I would even say possibly after a fire if you're in an open space in like in a house as you're doing overhaul. But that's we'll get to that, and you still should have some sort of pump, and that's for a different reason. But ultimately, there's nothing getting pushed into that sensor.
Yeah. I remember.
So pay the money, get the program up and running. There's grants out there. Sensit is a good company. It's not the only one, but get ones that have a pump that draw in air.
It's funny, and this is off topic, but you mentioned air monitoring for during overhaul. I remember when our chief, who's this is two chiefs prior, decided he wanted to buy hydrogen cyanide monitors and put them on all the officers' packs, and
Because
they were
oh
constantly on, and the whole point was to monitor the air during overhaul. Well, as soon as you entered the structure fire, you had a monitor blasting
oh yeah,
in your ear the entire time because there's hydrogen cyanide in fire in products of combustion.
right.
So we quickly removed those after a couple jobs guys had, and but
So, but even with the ones with the little pump on it, so that's specifically for um, an overhaul condition. Like you're not going to take. You can use a Sensit Gold, but that's kind of like overpowering. You're looking for the ambient air. So
right,
those basic ones without a pump or with just a barely a pump inside the hole are fine. But with the ones with the wand, with that little fine-tuned sniffer on the end. That's really what you want for your our normal bread and butter. It's a shitty phrase, but the smells and bells calls. When you're going to Mrs. Smith's house because she's saying that her alarm's going off, that's where you can go, okay, it's definitely this room. It's definitely this appliance. Definitely is this line going into the appliance. Now we can give her with a better degree of accuracy of an idea what she has to do, or transfer it to the utilities, which they're coming anyways, utility company. But now we can shut off and isolate something. If you just have the MSA, I keep picking on MSA because I see these most bought that in. Man, there's a little red thing. They're very similar to the ones that we keep on the EMS bags.
Yeah.
Like it's passive. It's not actively
Right.
drawing. There's another one I've seen out there too. That's they're the competition of those. The little red thing, little tiny 4-gas meter. It doesn't tell you anything. It really does not tell you. It
Yeah.
tells you when you walk in
It's
the
just the
door that
ambient
you can
air.
breathe it or not. It's not. It doesn't help. It's junk. I get it on a soapbox.
You talked about, running your meter along the lines, even with a pump. What people got to realize is that the lag time
Mhm.
in the pump, and a good, I'm going to say rule of thumb. People can blast me for saying rule of thumb, but it is what it is. That whole rule of thumb, I don't think that just because it came from the Boondock Saints doesn't make it true. The gas takes 1 second per 1 foot of tubing to get to the sensors.
Yes, I was
So
gonna
our
say. I think it was
Sensic
on that thing that I
Golds,
sent you too.
have, I want to say they're close to a foot of wand,
Oh, I think there's more of that. Yeah.
maybe 18 inches.
Yeah.
So you're looking, if you're just running gas lines and you're not moving slow, you might detect something once the meter goes off and you're moving too fast. The leak is actually where you already tested. It's not where your wand was, unless you're moving very methodically and slowly down that line. Now, the nice thing with the Sensic Golds is that they have what's called a leak detector on it, and I talked about it on the Instagram post. Is that the display might not show an actual numerical value of your LEL or your CO, but we have this little thumb wheel on the side. Well, the old ones had a
The
thumb
old
wheel.
ones
The
did,
old
yeah.
ones had the thumb wheel. I like those better because you could actually fine tune the leak. I feel better now. The new ones, you hit a button and like a metronome sound comes on, a ticking sound, and it's set at a certain speed. And once it starts detecting gas, maybe not enough for an LEL reading, but it knows that there's gas in the air, the metronome speeds up.
Yes, and it is super handy.
Yeah.
I think it's a great tool. I
Especially
do
when you're
like the wheel. I do miss the wheels.
Yeah, especially when you're checking um like unions and quarter turn shutoffs and T joints, because that plumber's goop, it dries out, if it's not maintained. You have natural gas lines that have been there for, see, my house was built in 68. We're at 60 years now, almost 50 something years, 50 plus years. If I haven't done anything, there's one new gas line I put in, but all the old stuff, I haven't done anything with it since I've been in my house. And if that plumber's putty dries out, or vibrations happen, and something, all that stuff creates a small pinhole leak in it, we could take the gas meter, put that leak detector setting on, and we can fine tune exactly where that leak is. Now, the reason why I like the wheel is because the wheel would speed up or slow down the ticking sound manually. And if the homeowner was, kind of being where he shouldn't be and kind of getting himself a little too involved with our investigation, I would spin the wheel up really fast and make the sound,
Ah, there it is.
make the
Yeah.
ticking sound more like a buzzing sound. I look at him, hey man, we got a situation going on here. You're gonna have to get out of here. They hear
Or
that
they go, "Hey,
noise.
here,
They hear,
you need a light," and they go to flick on the light, and you just
yeah.
swing that wheel.
Well, that you bring up a great point about, like, we're jumping to natural gas calls right now. got, I loved him. He was the senior guy of the firehouse for a long time. We go to a natural gas call, and the first thing he would do is start flipping lights on in the basement to go down to the basement. And I look at him, I go, "What if there's enough gas down there to set this off?" I go, "We have flashlights. Turn the flashlight on outside the house, and then walk in."
Yeah, specific flashlights too.
And that's
It's got to be intrinsically safe,
well, and that goes back
quote
to
unquote.
intrinsically safe equipment.
Hmm.
When was the last time a fire department had their intrinsically safe equipment tested to see if they're still intrinsically safe? Like even the confined space fans are the ram fans are supposed to be intrinsically safe. You got a confined space team, and stored on a trailer or stored on your rig or stored on a rescue, and that thing's bouncing around and getting, uh, you know, apparatus doors are not the best at keeping road grime and the elements out. So you get salt water in there and corrosion and all this other stuff. You take it out for training, it gets dropped, whatever happens to it. Are departments testing these things still to be intrinsically safe? Probably not.
I don't think so.
Our portable radios, our portable radios are supposed to be intrinsically safe.
They are, and specifically, they do. Certain brands will be identified. They'll say it right inside the battery compartment. This is intrinsically safe. It does not tell you to a degree that you have to have it retested.
Yeah,
But there's
and
some in there that will specifically say this is not intrinsically safe.
right, and you go to a couple structure fires,
Hmm.
it gets soaked with water, you drop it, it falls out. I shame on me, but I've dropped my portable radio just in the beginning of the day, putting it in my radio holster, not paying attention, and I'm shooting the breeze or doing the shift exchange with the the boss, and I'm not paying attention. Next thing you know, my lapel mic drops, hits the truck bay floor. Now that radio still works because they're pretty durable, but I don't know what that does to the intrinsically safe rating of that portable radio. Same thing with our flashlights. I don't know. I'm I'm pretty
They are
sure
supposed to be, yes.
they're
The
supposed to be,
orange plastic ones that we have are intrinsically safe. So are if you have a black one, it is.
but
What is
you
not is your regular streamlight click, tactical pen lights. Those are not intrinsically safe.
right, but you bounce those around,
That's true. Man.
doing a search, drills. I wear when we do bailout training or any firefighter survival training, I wear everything that I'm going into a structure fire with, and part of that is my flashlight,
Hmm.
and that's getting banged around, and God knows what happens to that thing when I'm bailing on it, when we're doing our yearly bailouts, and I can't 100% with certainty say that flashlight is still intrinsically safe. But what you can do to mitigate that question is to make sure you turn your flash. All electronics should be on prior to entry of the building
Correct.
if there's a natural gas call.
I would still go. So I do see. Okay, who arrives first at your scene? I know we run with our partner agencies, so it's not just the fire department showing up. And that's something that if you're trying to make that argument, hey, we're trying to do this, mitigate this issue in the safest way, those other agencies that are arriving, this is one of those avenues you can take to help say, hey, this is good for me, this is good for you, this is for the safety of the homeowner. Please do not go in there. And I've done this, took a we'll say another agency's radio. Let me see the radio, pop the battery out right in the back. It says, this is not intrinsically safe. Do not go in that building. Stop going in that building and then telling us that, oh, it's all good. It's just a dead battery. We don't know if it's a dead battery, but why are you in there? You don't have a pack on. You don't have any. These are small things. No different than when it is supposed to be at the dispatch level when the dispatcher or the telecommunicator isn't taking that call that says, and they have a complaint of, I smell natural gas or I have this issue. They say, do not hang up the phone. Don't turn any lights on or off. Just set the phone. If it's like the old style phones, I don't know if anybody still has a house phone, but you just set it down on the table. Don't hang it up. Because that click as you hang it back up on the hook, what's called the hook. It could cause a spark. You know,
We're dating ourselves here.
I realize I'm saying some of these things, and then I'm like, when was the last time you saw that? And one of my most recent gas calls, she called from a house phone. And it was sitting on the counter when we walked in the door. It was like a 2-story. It was just a regular 2-story residential. There was nothing special about it. But you go in and 2 steps up to the kitchen, and it caught my eye because I haven't seen a house phone in a bit. And the house phone was sitting on the counter, with the beep, 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 beep. And I just, oh, shoot, because they told her not to hang it up. And I'm like, that's all right. Somebody listened. Then she goes, here, let me get the light for you. Reaches over. Don't touch that.
Yeah.
But anyways, the intrinsically safe stuff, it should take that into consideration. At least be purchasing it if you're a department listening or somebody who is looking to upgrade equipment or buy new equipment for your department. It is something that technically is kind of a requirement. You're supposed to be doing that. It's not an option to say, oh, it's cheaper for me to not buy intrinsically safe, so I'm going to do that. I'm sorry, you're in the business of danger. You can't. Part of one of the rules. Now if we bounce them off the apparatus floor and we're unaware of it, yeah, good point. Maybe we need a whether it's a policy or a program that retests these things. I don't know. I haven't actually considered that before, because we do. You're right. We bounce the flashlights off everything and beat the snot out of them. But I can tell you for certain that some of the other people we respond with do not have intrinsically safe stuff. That's an irritant, but
Yeah.
neither here nor there though. But you should be using the proper equipment. So we're proper equipment going into the building, making sure everybody's getting out, metering, and then how well can you meter? How far can you define that? Now, I kind of briefed over it quickly. Our utility companies, they're started automatically, and they're going to be coming. We cannot cancel them. And I think that's for a good thing. They're the professionals. We're there just to mitigate any immediate life hazard, and then they take over. That's fair. And if they show up and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not getting anything either. This is totally safe," we can let them in. Hey, then that's their call. They're the professionals. The subject matter. Jesus, subject matter expert in that field. That's all right, but some places might not have that policy, or different counties or states, you might not be considering the utilities unless you think there's really an issue, and you might want to get those started and get them there, especially if you have one of these meters that does not have a pump. That's great. You walked in the door, maybe your meter didn't pick up, but that doesn't mean the house is completely safe. You can't say that to a certain, degree of certainty that, hey, this is 100% safe, and or cancel the utility company. Call them anyways, because they have the better equipment. Which brought us to the reason why we have the one brand, the Sensate Gold, is because utility companies recommended that we had them. They say, hey, this will help you do pretty much everything you're looking to accomplish before we get there, or instead of us getting there. This is a long time ago, and we went, oh, didn't think of that. For the same reason, they said, hey, you don't have a pump on there, you're not doing anything.
Yeah. One of the, and I don't know, just because we don't use those meters. One thing our Sensate Golds will also do, and I think it's still in our policy, if we have a significant event, and I don't know what the significant event, what would dictate what a significant event would be. I'm guessing like probably a fatality due to CO poisoning or something like that. Our Sensate Gold meters also have a function on it that can actually store data, and
That's
we
correct.
can upload it to our fire reports as well.
Yes. Sounds like a CYA type of thing. It's not. It's to help make sure those families get the help that they need, and blame isn't placed somewhere else.
Right.
It just reinforces, hey, this is what we were doing. This is definitely the causation of whatever. Because unfortunately, there's certain laws and policies that are in place that try to reduce payment of, whatever.
Our utility company, the non-cancellation policy is relatively new.
Yeah, a
I
couple
believe
years.
that happened after the house explosion in our area, in our district. That's a new policy that we can't cancel them anymore. And I think, like you said, I think that's a good policy because they are the subject matter experts. And who knows? We're good, but we're still human. We might miss something. We try not to. We do our best not to miss something, but it happens.
Let's see. So let's roll into the LEL. I think we hit on using
One
where to meter.
before we
Go
get into
ahead.
the LEL, one quick, and I always there was an old school utility guy. I haven't seen him around anymore. He's probably retired. But what he did is he took a mop head, like the female end of a mop head or a
Mhm.
broomstick, and shaved it off so it was just the inside threads. And then he duct taped that to his handle of his Sense of Gold meter. So if he got into a house with maybe vaulted ceilings, or he was
Mm.
in a commercial structure where you want a meter high, but your arms only go up so high, he could take a broomstick, screw it into the end of his Sense of Gold meter, and at least meter. And you might not be able to read it, but if the alarm goes off, you know something's going on up there. I'm not saying we have to do that. Our trucks carry duct tape. We have 6-foot hooks. We can duct tape our meter. And some of the vaulted ceilings that we have in these patio homes that we go to all the time for their smoke detectors. If we have to meter up high for natural gas, that's an option that we have. I think Sense Gold came out with an attachment that you can buy for the handles of the meters now that will allow you to attach a broomstick to the
Oh,
meters
I've
now.
never considered that. Yeah, no, I don't know who this guy is. I'm sure if I saw him again, but no, I've never seen that trick. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so let's go into the LELs.
All right. So you said that the first thing that we're looking for when we're reading our meters, regardless if it's 4 gas, 5 gas, and whatever your setup is the oxygen. Now, if we're going there for a gas specific call, obviously you're going to use one of the other ones, but mainly you have the one that says LEL. It's the only one that there may be a brand where you can select in there to display specifically what you have it calibrated for, but otherwise it'll just say percent %LEL or LEL. Now, LEL is lower explosive limit. I think most of the firefighters out there know what that stands for, but may not know how to interpret the data that's being read to them. So you have the lower explosive limit, and then you have the upper explosive limit. The way you can think of that is that the percent of volume of gas, so the volume of gas in a space, there is a magic number that you have to reach from 0 up to that number, and that's your no boom zone. Okay, so that's your lower explosive limit. So the max you can go without this thing going kaboom. Then there's then there's the boom zone. So that's between the LEL and the UEL, the upper explosive limit. And those vary depending on the gases. Once you go over the upper explosive limit, you're no longer in a boom zone, you're in a no boom zone, so it won't explode or won't ignite, however you want to put it. But the problem is you're in a danger zone because eventually we have to get that gas out.
Which you talk to utility guys, being in the upper explosive limit is, some say it's more dangerous than being in the explosive limit.
Yeah, and that's some I think most of the like Fire One manuals and everything will say as such. And their concern is, well, the manual's concern is that when you vent those gases, you have to come back down through the boom zone. So
Right.
you're operating in a crazy space that you don't want to be in, and anything can go. Somebody keys up on a radio that's been broken or non intrinsically safe, it could set that off. A small static electric charge, going across somebody's carpet could set that off. Stupid little things like that, and that's in a house. There could be void spaces such as confined space as well. So that lower explosive, that little LEL that's being read is a percent of the lower explosive limit. Okay. Let's say your meter is calibrated for natural gas, methane. Okay. The lower explosive limit is 5. The number that you're seeing on the meter is percent of 5.
Right.
So if it reads 25, that's 25% of the LEL, the lower explosive range or
Of
limit.
5%.
Yes. So it's 25% of 5%. It sounds counterintuitive until you do it a handful of times and you really show people doing the little test facility outside back the firehouse type of thing. in a small space, you can demonstrate these things. But understanding what that percentage, when it reaches 100, you're now in the boom zone. It could, something could go boom. Some meters, not all meters, will then switch over once that lower explosive limit's reached. It'll switch over to the volume of gas. There may be another one out there. Not all of them do that, so you really have to understand how your meter works.
Yeah, ours specifically will say gas, and I think the screen light. Obviously, the screen's already lighting up, and it's already alarming.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll stay in alarm, even though the LEL switched over to gas, and it might read 1%, but you're in alarm. That's because you have 1%. You're at actually
Well, it would be, let's say it's
over
methane, it would be
5%.
5
Yeah,
over 5.
yeah,
Yeah. So it might say 6, and you didn't go
right,
from 25% LEL to suddenly 6. No, you're over 100% of the lower explosive range. 6 is
correct.
over 100%
Yeah,
of 5, right? It's very confusing. Now, it took me a while to, as I started watching. One of the bosses is in charge of calibrating our equipment, and he started showing me the internals and how these things work. And I didn't realize this, but that little cartridge that's inside of that's reading the LEL, it's just a hydrocarbon cartridge. That's all it's reading. There's not a cartridge in there that's specific for methane. Then there's one specific for, say, propane, one specific for gasoline, one specific for acetylene. It's just a hydrocarbon. It covers them all, and they need to be calibrated to a specific gas. All right, so our cartridges, when they're new, they have to be set to read methane. In other words, when it's the hydrocarbon that it's reading, you want the monitor to display readings that are valued to methane.
yeah. Essentially, the easiest way to explain this is that the sensor picks up hydrocarbons, and then they fine tune the numerical
Mm-hmm.
output that it's giving to read for methane.
Yes. So the numbers you're reading is always going to be the numbers for methane, because that's what we set it to. Now, the interesting part is you can use methane directly to calibrate these things, or you can calibrate it with something else. One of the cheaper options is to use pentane. We got all the anes at play, so it's no different than all the rest of them, but it is cheaper. And then we can calibrate that value from pentane to methane so that the machine can be calibrated over and over again. And it's still going to give us the values for methane. So for us at work, we use a pentane because it's cheap and available, calibrate the machine, and it's always going to read for natural gas methane. Where this is important is that you got to make sure that these things are calibrated and know what it's calibrated to. As you said, in our region, what is it, about 75%? Maybe, I think there's more
I
than
was just
that
throwing
now.
it might be more.
There's still quite on the far outskirts or the far sides of the county. There's a lot of people who use propane. So you have to know that you're going from a building that's supplied by methane versus a building that's supplied by propane. Where I live, it's probably split down the middle. It's 50-50. North side of town, it's gas. South side of town, it's all propane. What are the meters read, or what are the meters reading? Well, they're reading gas. Well, which gas? And again, this is what started launching this interest, and where I'm trying to dial in and ask questions at work and other regions. Hey, what do you guys use? How do you guys deal with these things? Do you have two different meters? One that says specifically propane. How do you know you're going into a propane building? Other than there's a giant bubble sitting in the lawn, like, are you aware? Okay, so we mentioned if your meters like ours, they're calibrated to methane. 5% to 17% is your bad zone. That's the boom. Okay, so that's the lower and the upper. Propane has a different range, 2.9. So let's just call it 3 amongst friends, 3 to 12. Okay, different range. So if I take a methane calibrated meter and I go into a building that I now know is propane, it's still going to read. It doesn't know that it's propane. It doesn't know that it's acetylene. It doesn't know anything else. I have to know that there is a difference from that value. So what it is reading, I have to offset that reading, and we call those correction factors. There's lots of cool little charts out there. There's a company specific. I don't know if you want to name them, but there's a
Yeah, I don't
company
care.
out there that Taylorton's does a great job. They have a little card. You log on, you order a card, you tell them I have a methane meter. I need the correction factors, and it gives you all the correction factors for most common. I think it's like 20 different gases. So I did this for the guys out here. Hey, here's your correction factors. We also have one for response and all that stuff, which I believe we mentioned them before because of scene size ups. Now, if you know specifically that your meter is calibrated for propane, then you want to get the propane card, right? So that when you go into some of these gas environments, you can now apply the correction factor. For instance, so we said our meter is methane, and if we take that into a area that we know is to have propane leak, or we've identified that it's propane leak, whatever number is displayed, let's say it's coming up, we'll go back to that 20. Okay, it's saying 20% of the lower explosive limit. Again, for methane, the lower explosive limit is 5. So 20% of 5, we're talking what, 1 and some change, 1.25, right? We're sorry, excuse me, it's 25. Yeah, so it's still under the lower explosive limit. But when I start going up, I have yet to reach the boom zone. But if I know I'm in propane, that direct number that's on that meter is not telling me propane. I have to multiply in order to get to propane. If I start getting up to a higher end, there is the chance that I could actually already be into the boom zone, but my meter is not going off. Do you follow what I'm saying? When does our meter start beeping? Do you know what percentage of LEL?
I
I
want to
can't
say
remember the
maybe
specific number.
15, maybe.
15? Let's say you even have a higher number. You could be already over the lower explosive limit of propane because you are in a propane environment, but your meter is reading a number that it thinks is reading for methane. So if we don't have those appropriately converted, it's not going to beep, right? Because again, we calibrated for methane, it doesn't know it's reading propane. We have to verify that number that's on that screen and multiply it by the correction factor.
Yeah, methane to propane is 1.62.
There you go. So
Yeah,
1.62. So okay, so 25% of the lower explosive limit because it thinks it's reading methane, but it's not. It's propane. Multiply that by 1.62. You're at 40.5%
of
of the lower
2%.
of 2%. Right. So what happens when you start getting to say 75%? You
Yeah,
know?
you're going to get there
Oh,
a lot quicker. So if you have a methane, let's just if you have a methane meter and it's reading 50% of your LEL,
mm-hmm. Right. For methane, that's still fine. We're under the lower explosive limit.
you're at 81% of the LEL for propane.
81. You still got your calculator up?
Oh yeah.
So let's say 75. So it's reading 75% LEL, right? It's not 100. So if it's methane, we're still good. But let's say we walk into a propane environment, it's reading 75, multiply that by 1.62. What do you got?
You're at 122% of
120
the
something.
LEL.
So in other words, we're already in the boom zone,
Yeah.
but that meter might not be switching over, converting to that what you call gas, percent of gas. See what I'm saying? So there is a potential you could already be in a more dangerous environment. This came up at work, not because a house is exploding and not specific to propane or methane, but because of what we found out, acetone.
I was going to say it's acetone.
Yes, acetone. So what we were finding is that people were calling saying they kept smelling nail polish, and that made no sense. Right? We're getting it from all over the place, and when the wind blew, more neighborhoods were smelling it. What was happening is they were re-sleeving some pipes in different neighborhoods. So instead of digging deep and replacing pipes, they were. I'm sure you guys have seen it on like the internet. There's been all these viral videos where this looks like a Play-Doh mold pushes through a pipe and comes out the other side. So it looks like Play-Doh's being pushed through a pipe. Well, they're just re-sleeving the inside. Part of the chemical process to cure that sleeving off gases as acetone. It converts an off gas as acetone. So when you have a high concentration acetone in the area, you can use your methane, you know, gas meter, right? We didn't have it programmed for acetone, but I can read that ambient air. So if it backs up, let's say it's backing up into somebody's basement and I go in the basement, it's giving me an LEL, but it's not reading, it doesn't know it's not reading methane. So I have to convert over to the percent by adding that, by multiplying by that correction factor.
which is 1.7.
Right. So we're kind of close to the propane adjustment.
And what you have to be careful about with propane is way heavier than air.
Mm-hmm.
And I used back in college, I was in a fire investigation class for part of the fire protection technology course, and one of the old school arson investigators was the adjunct professor, and he investigated a fire that happened. I think it was in the town I live in, where they had a propane leak in the backyard, and the house was lower than the back, so the backyard sloped uphill. And I don't know if the grill or whatever propane tank they had was higher than the basement. Propane tank leaked. The propane followed the contour of the land, got into the house, furnace
Okay.
kicked on, started a fire. So
That's wild.
yeah,
I'm looking at a list of other common gases with their LEL, UEL. Here's another one that still out there, still available. Fuel oil. Zero point 0.7 is the lower explosive limit, and then 5 is the upper. That's a lot tighter and lower margin than methane or propane. So we could easily, with that correction factor, again, we're going to reach that a lot quicker than we would any of the
right.
other ones.
Yeah, it I don't know how many. I mean, I didn't know about correction factors until I think I started teaching confined space, and shame on me for not knowing it, but it was never taught in our department. It was just, here's the 4-gas meter. If it goes off, just let the company officer know what you're reading, and then he can give the report. If it's not natural gas, and I mentioned before, and you mentioned before as well, if you know you're going into a propane fed house, that's what they're using, you can still use that meter. You just got to know how to convert it over to read properly.
Looking through some of these other ones, it started coming up when we're really getting into the pre-plans and everything too. Is when we started kind of paying attention to some of these other correction factors. The acetone one was very specific. It was not on our radar because we don't have anything that really uses a ton of acetone. It can be used as like a solvent, or it's commonly found in solvents, but we have a lot of industrial stuff around us. And one of the other ones that we always find is items like toluene. Tau, Jesus,
Toluene.
TOU. Thank you. That's a common one. That's a like a paint thinner. Same thing like xylene. That's common ingredient for some paint thinners as well. Shit, you go to the Home Depot, you have all of these things are sitting there on a rack all together. But you'll find these things in barrels versus little jugs, just because they use them in so much of the cleaning processes, whether that's machining or it's some sort of coatings process. Even around me, I've gone in some of these buildings before and seen all these thinners and everything, and okay, maybe we should get one of those correction factor cards. Set them up on the rig or something. I don't know if they still use them, but as long as they're aware of this, so they go in and like, yeah, no, it's not doing anything. I got nothing. It's like, well, it's a lot lower, so something might be a lot more in the toluene world, than it would be in the methane world.
One other tool besides the meters that we can use as well is our thermal imaging cameras.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a lighter.
But if you have a gas leak, just think of your SCBA bottle. You breathe down that bottle, or you just crack that nozzle open. What happens to the fittings? They get extremely cold.
Yeah.
So if you have a gas leak, like a outside meter on a hot day, nobody should be running gas to heat their house on a hot day. And if there's a leak at the meter or a leak around the meter, you can potentially pick up cold pipes, cold air pipes with your thermal imaging camera.
And everybody knows what we're talking about. They've probably seen it, didn't recognize it, but barbecuing, you got a picnic going on, making 200 hamburgers with the propane stove. You look at the propane tank on the side of the grill, and you start seeing that frost line.
It's sweating
And,
and it's getting cold, and
yeah. Yeah.
but I mean, these gas calls, like we said, they don't they don't get the juices flowing, but the hazards are there, and guys just got to be diligent, making sure that one, they know how to read their equipment, they're metering properly, they're turning on their electronics before they go inside, they're parking the rig where they should be parked. If your policy dictates when you get to a certain amount of gas, and that's another thing we didn't even mention, was pulling hand lines on, depending on what the levels we're getting. But we've pulled hand lines on jobs before, and a lot of times the utility companies are kind of like, "What are you doing?" And one of the state instructors I used to work with, he used to be a NICEAG employee, and he would tell stories about when they would fix gas lines. They would be in the trench working on gas lines, free flowing gas, and they would be smoking cigarettes.
Yeah. Because you're way up in that upper limit.
Yeah, and the guy that was about to plug it or turn the gas off, he would let everybody know, "Hey, gas is getting shut off." They all put their cigarettes out and flick them out of the trench. They shut the gas off. It would vent out, and then they light their cigarettes back up again.
So that's with piping and distribution and stuff like that. And this is, was it year and a half ago? The parent company for our utility company came in and did a little PowerPoint presentation, everything, and showed us where all the gates are and how the mercaptan's added. And this really struck me. And it wasn't long after that it happened at my house. So you have your main piping that goes through the state, all over the country, and everything. When gas is moving at large volumes like that, they don't have any. Methane on its own is
Odorless.
colorless, odorless. You can't smell it. Same thing with propane. So they add something to it. There's an additive, and mercaptan's one of them. So the mercaptan doesn't get added until it's the next pipe down. So they call them like gates. Not gates like the town, but one of them is way out west side of the county from us. That's our closest gate. And that gate, as it passes through, that's how much they're going to charge that local region or that local area by volume. And then it's up to that local region to then go by house to house to house. That's where that mercaptan gets added, is at the gate off that main pipe that runs through the country in the States. So something that happened at my house, a lot of people started calling saying that they're smelling natural gas, but it was like every house on the blocks for a couple streets. And we started hearing reports in other towns. And it's like, man, we're thinking an overpressurization, because there shouldn't be, sometimes that could happen. It's been a very long time since it has, but they could be overpressurizing and pushing more gas in the house than it, it should be accepting. Well, what it turned out is that we were smelling, like I had it in my house. I had a buddy run over because I was actually at work. I'm like, "Hey, can you run over and just double check, peek your head in the door? Do you smell?" He's like, "Oh my God, you got a gas leak in here." I'm like, "Can you shut it off from the outside?" So he went and shut it off, and then went around and found, he's like, "I just shut off the valve. It's no big deal." What happened is when they were adding the mercaptan, they moved a decimal place. So they overloaded the mercaptan. So the smallest leak, where usually when it dissipates after it like leaks out, you probably won't really smell it. It was just overpowering. It was charging in the houses and everything. It's good and bad. All right. The mercaptan's not being overpressurized, just being more, an additional, like a massive amount is being added to it. So it's a higher concentration. It's kind of like perfumes. You have like the super cheap one, it's like very little oil is in it, versus the really expensive brand, it's got a ton more oil in it, so it lasts longer. Same thing with mercaptan. So what was happening is there was just too much in there. The other side of this is, well, yeah, just because I smell in my house doesn't mean it's a bad thing just because they added more mercaptan. It also means I have a gas leak somewhere that's so small it really doesn't mean anything. I could never smell it before. Either I was nose blind to it, or it's so small that it dissipates quickly as soon as it cracks, escapes, wherever it's venting. So when someone says, "Oh, I smell rotten eggs," maybe it's not the wind in the valve outside. It could be a small over additive that's in there. It is very important to know the difference and understand that there could be the other incident where captain didn't get added or something. Don't know of any of them happening, but something to be aware of.
Well, it's good to be aware of that because you might have a transmission line leak, and there might not be any odor to it because it's
Or
before
that.
because the captain hasn't been added yet.
Yeah, that's a major incident right there. That could there's a potential for a major incident. But now it's even more pressed on that you have to understand your meters. Let's see. So that's LEL, Mercaptan, conversion factors. With those, with the meters themselves, so other than the different types, there is the importance of calibration and bump testing. Two different things. They're similar. You have to, for calibration, go by the manufacturer's recommendations. Check the manual. Usually, departments will have a policy put in place that's based off this recommendation. There isn't one out there that says something specific. We recommend you do every 6 months. Well, what about the department that uses it 1,000 times in 6 months versus the department that uses it only 10 times in 6 months? There's a big difference. So your department should, based off of the recommendations from that manufacturer, come up with a good plan in place. At work, ours is once a month, is what I believe is what ours says, is once a month. So I go around, they collect the meters and they calibrate them. Bump testing is something slightly different, and it may mean something different in some of the other industries, but essentially it's really for the departments or the organizations, and this includes mining, safety, all that, like your utility companies. They use these things 100 times every single day. Each time you use it, it's kind of like it's no different than the air filters in your car. They're slowly getting more shit built up. So you have to bump test it to zero it out. It's like standing on the scale. Okay, every time you want that scale to recalibrate every single time, or you can tear out a scale. So I don't know if you ever weighed anything out like food or maybe in science class or something. You put the bag or a dish on the scale. Well, it's reading the weight of the object that's going to hold the substance. So now you got to tear it out. So you zero it out, and then you add your substance into the bowl or the dish or whatever. That's essentially the same thing. Like the cabin air filter, it's kind of like setting itself to zero based off the fact that it's being used constantly. And each
Yeah.
time you use it, it's getting a little bit dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. The calibration allows it to go all the way back to essentially a clean filter, way back to 0, 0. Having a policy in place helps you because you want to have that, again, that degree of accuracy, whatever that means for your department when you go into these residences. Anything different with that, with bump testing?
No, you explained it great. And
We don't bump test, but
no, ours
it
don't
is it
really.
is an option.
It's an option. It really, I mean, maybe 3, 4, 5 gas calls a week. Not really necessary to bump test them.
No.
Our old meters that the corporation bought for us on a donation, they were decent meters, but it always seems like you would get out of the rig and something had a level on it. Like it would, you would read like 0.5 of the LEL. So it was a very quick bump test that you could do it. You just hit a button and it would zero it out for you. Anything else we got on gas emergencies?
Kind of briefed over the arrival process, who goes when. Is it lights and sirens? Is it send all companies, all hands, send the whole battalion? What do you do? That's going to be agency specific and how your policies play out. Is there illness? Is there no illness? Um, is it imperative that you drive lights and sirens through town for a bad battery? How do you get that information ahead of time? So whether that's at a telecommunications level or that's based off of reading your CAD, coming up with a good policy for that as well. Always uphill, upwind, and approach. It's not just where you position your apparatus, but it's also how you approach, knowing your district. You might go down the same entranceway or the same main. Let's say it's a two-way street. It's open at both ends. You might always go from the west side going east, from the west side going east. You might want to go around the other way, type of thing, and approach depending. Or east going west, depending on the direction of the wind that day. So be aware that you should be treating all gas emergencies the same way. Do not get complacent. Have your PPE on. So even though it's she calls and Mrs. Smith calls for that bad battery, treat it as if this house is filling with gas right now. Every single one. Get your gear on before going inside. Make sure your positioned in the appropriate place. Have that meter fired up, ready to rock and roll before going inside. I can't stress that enough for all the incidents that we've seen where it could have gone bad, and we would have hated to be out of place or too complacent those days. One of the questions I had, so we didn't cover it in the Q&A session. I kind of wanted to hold on to this one, but it stood out for every single time we go through a new topic. It's not just firefighters that listen to this. Sometimes the lay people listen to it as well. And the question was, what can residents do? This person was discussing more about what can we do to make it safer for firemen. In this particular thing, what I thought of is like, what can residents do to mitigate these issues without needing to call or trying to mitigate something ahead of time? And the biggest thing is your batteries. Batteries and detectors is probably number one. The recommendation is every 6 months. When you change the clocks, change the batteries. For those of you that live in that one section of the country, you're screwed. No, everything's coming out to 10-year sealed batteries now, and they're pretty reliable. If something happens, either go pick one up at the big box store or call your local fire department. They might have a program in place. We have a program in place at our work that will come and give you a free one. We'll install it, we'll test it, and if it's bad, we'll give you another one.
Yeah. The other thing
Uh,
is people got to realize with the CO detectors that those sensors go bad, and it's usually right around the 7 year mark.
Yeah. There are there's one that's a couple brands out there that do the all-in-one. It's a CO and a smoke detector. I'm personally not a huge fan because one of those sensors will die before the other, and you're just going to they cost a little bit more. So you're like, well, I'm not buying 2 units. You know what? You're going to only replace in one side and you can't take it apart. So
Right.
it's right. Yeah, I usually recommend just get 2 different ones. That's a big thing. Probably the other thing that we run into a lot is inside the oven. On the very, very bottom, people don't like to clean the inside of the oven, so they put down the foil inside of a gas stove. Wow, all the drippings hit the foil. I just ball it up and pitch it, not realizing that if it is a gas stove, there are vents under there, and that stove is designed very specifically to have that burning inside of it, not produce CO. And when you cover up those vents in there, it screws up how it burns, and you end up getting a buildup of CO. That's probably I say it's one of the most common ones we go to.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. But I bought it on Amazon. It says it's specifically made for this. Well, can't trust it,
Right.
unless it's purchased directly by the manufacturer for that thing, from the manufacturer of that specific make and model. Don't do it. Just not worth it. So for the residents out there, change your batteries. Don't put stuff in your oven that shouldn't be in there. Just only food. And any other recommendations?
All right. I think that's it. We might come back to this, depending on maybe get a job or so that piques our interest, but I think we covered pretty much the basics.
Yeah, don't get complacent for the guys, men and women going to these operations. That's number one. Understand your equipment. Read the manuals, and remember that even if it sounds like it's a BS call, you're there because somebody called for help and they're expecting you to have the answer. This is a tool to help give them that answer.
Yep.
Okay. With that, we got a wrap up. So if anybody's got any questions, comments, complaints, please fire those off at firefrom2windows@gmail.com. We like to collect those, and hopefully we can do another Q&A session if we get enough interest. Sometimes there's some things in there that just spark another topic as well. We're always looking for interesting things to digest here. I got an Instagram, Fire from 2 Windows, just at Fire from 2 Windows.
That's it.
You put something up for gas emergencies, right? You said
Yeah, I think I had 2 posts on it.
a couple things. Any other mentions?
Not right now. Like I said, fire off some questions. Spurn our inch. If you want to DM us some topics, we'll run through them. I think New year, we're gonna hopefully pump out more than. When did we start last year? June,
Um, for some reason, I want to say March or May.
maybe. I don't know. I have to go
I'll have
back.
to look back.
So we did 13 in 1 year. I would like to do
I'd
that
like to
and
get.
more.
Yeah, me too.
So
Me too. Pumping these things out, and we'll see how it goes. All right, take it easy, everyone, and be safe.
I guess it.